Imagine a microscopic bubble of fat.
Just floating there.
Yeah, just floating like an ocean of boiling acid and toxic chemicals.
Right.
And it has no brain, it has no nervous system at all. It is literally just a sack of molecules being violently tossed around by deep-sea thermal vents.
This is roughly 4 billion years ago, right?
Exactly, 4 billion years ago. And suddenly, the temperature spikes. The chemical environment turns completely deadly.
Okay.
And this tiny bubble, it wiggles a microscopic hair-like tail, changes direction, and literally swings away from the heat toward a pocket of nutrient-rich minerals.
Which is incredible on its own.
It is. But here's the crazy part. According to a highly controversial, mind-bending new theoretical framework, that tiny, seemingly mindless twitch in the dark is the exact same mechanism driving the massive artificial general intelligence systems currently taking over our planet.
Right, which completely upends the narrative we are all being fed right now.
Completely.
Because if you look at the media landscape in our current year, in 2026, we treat intelligence like it's a modern invention.
Yeah, like it just popped out of nowhere.
Exactly. We talk about it as if it sprang into existence the moment a hominid grew, a cerebral cortex. Or, even worse, the moment some tech company plugged in a giant server farm.
It is honestly exhausting. I mean, we are constantly looking at human brains, and we're looking at computer chips, and we are just desperately trying to force a straight line between the two.
But that narrow focus might be exactly why the tech industry is hitting a wall today.
Right, and that brings us to the focus of today's deep dive. We are looking at a fascinating set of papers by Professor Guy Lakeman.
They're titled The Evolutionary Arc of Intelligence, From Gravity to Cybernetics.
And the direction towards integrated agile superintelligence agent hubs.
They're quite the titles.
A bit of a mouthful, yeah. But the mission for today's deep dive is massive. We are tracing the true evolutionary arc of intelligence.
All the way back.
All the way back. We aren't starting with the microchip, and we certainly aren't starting with the first human. We're going back 14 billion years. Because Lakeman's core argument is that understanding this entire cosmic timeline is the absolute only way to understand why our current obsession with building giant, monolithic, energy-hungry AI models is just an evolutionary dead end.
It really is a phenomenal premise. I mean, it's intimidating, but phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Lakeman is arguing that intelligence is not a final product. You can't just code it into a machine and call it a day. It is an ongoing 14 billion year process.
Governed by some very strict rules, right?
Exactly. Unyielding rules of physics and chemistry and biology. And if we want to build sustainable cyber intelligence today, what he calls agentic intelligence, we cannot just, invent our own rules.
Right. We have to play by the universe's rules.
We have to respect the rules that have governed the universe since the very beginning. If we ignore that deep evolutionary arc, it's like we're trying to build a skyscraper, but starting at the penthouse.
Gravity will just pull the whole thing down.
Precisely.
So we need to go back to the beginning. Way before brains, before biology, before the Earth was even a rock. And Lakeman actually starts by picking a fight with one of the most famous scientific terms in history.
He really does.
He completely rejects the term Big Bang.
He does, yeah. And the distinction he's making here, it's not just semantics. It is structural to how we understand the universe.
How so?
Well, I mean, the word bang implies this explosion originating from a single centralized point. It implies an epicenter.
Like a firecracker.
Exactly. You light a firecracker and everything blows outward from that one initial spark. But when astrophysicists look at cosmic background radiation today,
using all those advanced satellite telescopes.
Right. When they look at that data, the centralized explosion model just does not hold up. There is no center point of the universe.
So if it wasn't a giant bomb going off in the middle of nowhere, what was it? How does Lakeman describe the origin of, everything?
He calls it a distributed entropic transition shift.
Okay, I am definitely going to need you to translate that into English. A distributed entropic transition shift. What does that actually look like?
Sure. So think about water turning into ice.
Okay.
If you drop the temperature of a completely still lake below freezing all at once, the water doesn't just freeze from one single ice cube in the exact center that spreads outward.
Oh, right. The state change happens everywhere.
Everywhere, simultaneously. The energy dynamics shift across the entire system all at once.
Wow.
So in the early universe, we had this soup of unimaginably dense, high-energy states. And the shift was a sudden, universe-wide reorientation of this energy. It happened everywhere, all at once, without a central command.
No central point. And from that massive state change, matter finally appears. But Lakeman throws a bit of a curveball here, doesn't he?
He does.
He points out that this matter, like the physical stuff that eventually becomes you, me, this microphone I'm holding, the stars, it's actually just a rounding error in the grand scheme of the universe.
It is incredibly humbling when you think about it. All visible matter makes up maybe 5% of the universe.
5%.
Yeah. The vast majority, over 95%, is dark matter and dark energy.
Which we can't even really interact with.
Right. We know it exists because we can observe its massive gravitational effects pulling on galaxies, but it has almost zero interaction with our matter-oriented world. We can't see it, touch it, or interact with it chemically.
But for that tiny 5% of normal matter, the rules had to be established immediately.
They did.
And the very first rule, the prime organizer of all this chaotic new reality, was gravity.
Exactly.
Lakeman actually calls gravity the elusive and evasive force of nature, which is such a cool phrase. It is the first clue to how intelligent creatures eventually appeared, because without gravity, that newly formed matter just drifts in a massive expanding void forever.
Nothing happens.
Right, gravity is the contractor that actually starts building the stage.
Precisely. Gravity started pulling all those scattered subatomic particles and simple hydrogen atoms together. And it is a slow, relentless process.
Over millions of years.
Millions of years.
Yeah.
These atoms clump together into these massive clouds. And as more and more matter accumulates, the gravitational pull inward becomes immense.
Just crushing pressure.
So much pressure. The internal friction and pressure at the core of these clouds generate heat that is so intense, the hydrogen atoms are literally crushed into each other. They fuse. Nuclear fusion begins.
And a star is born.
Yes. And those early stars were the universe's first manufacturing plants.
Manufacturing plants for elements, right?
Exactly. During their lifespans, and especially during the incredibly violent supernova explosions when they die, they forge heavier elements. They take simple hydrogen and smash it into helium.
Then carbon, oxygen, nitrogen.
Iron. And they just spray these newly forged chemical building blocks across the cosmos.
And then that debris eventually gets pulled back together by gravity to form new stars, and crucially, planetary disks.
The orbits, yeah.
So gravity sets the table. It builds planets entirely composed of these new complex minerals. But then gravity's primary role in driving complexity kind of hits a ceiling, doesn't it?
It does.
Because it can hold a rock together, but it cannot make a rock think. So the baton is passed to chemistry, and Lakeman paints a picture of early Earth that is just terrifying.
It's a nightmare.
If you dropped a human onto Earth 4 billion years ago, they wouldn't last a single second.
Not even a second. It was a violent, chaotic maelstrom. The atmosphere was this toxic smog of methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide.
No oxygen to breathe.
None. And you had massive oceans being whipped into a total frenzy by extreme fluid dynamics and these massive tidal forces from a moon that was much, much closer to the Earth than it is today.
Plus the volcanoes.
Right, volcanic activity was constantly spewing heavy metals and minerals into the water. Lightning storms were raging constantly, just tearing through the nitrogen-rich atmosphere.
It sounds like hell. But that chaos is exactly what was required. It is prebiotic chemistry. The lightning provides the massive jolt of energy needed to break apart simple atmospheric gases.
So they can recombine.
Right. They recombine into more complex molecules. The boiling thermal vents provide heat and mineral catalysts. And slowly, out of this toxic soup, you start getting the spontaneous formation of amino acids.
Which is a massive leap.
Huge. And that leads us to a major milestone before DNA even enters the picture. Lakeman focuses heavily here on the RNA world hypothesis.
Yeah, and to understand the RNA world, you really have to realize that modern biology requires a bit of a chicken and egg paradox to be solved.
Oh, so?
Well, today DNA holds all the genetic instructions, right?
Okay.
But it requires proteins to copy itself.
Okay.
And proteins do all the mechanical work, but they require the instructions from DNA to actually be built.
Right.
So which came first?
Right. You need one to make the other.
Exactly. But the RNA world hypothesis solves this. RNA, or ribonucleic acid, is a molecule that can actually do both.
Oh.
Yeah, it can store genetic information like a hard drive, and it can act as a catalyst like a machine to drive chemical reactions.
But at this stage, pre-4 billion years ago, these RNA molecules are just naked strands floating in the boiling ocean, right?
Right.
They're just being sloshed around by fluid dynamics. I mean, they aren't alive.
Correct. They are literally just complex chemistry. But as the oceans churned, these RNA molecules began to aggregate. And crucially, they started interacting with lipids.
which are simple fats.
Yes, simple fats that also form naturally in this crazy environment. If you've ever shaken up a bottle of oil and vinegar,
The little bubbles.
right, you know that fats naturally form tiny spherical bubbles in water. In biology, these are called phospholipid bilayers.
Okay, so a bubble of fat accidentally swallows a tangled mess of self-replicating RNA, and suddenly the RNA has a boundary,
It's a wall.
a wall separating the inside from the chaotic outside. Lakeman calls these protocells.
Yes, and they were the precursors to simple bacteria, the prokaryotes. No nucleus, no complex internal organs, just a lipid membrane protecting some chemical machinery inside.
But at this point, their survival was entirely dictated by luck, wasn't it?
100%. If the ocean current pushed the protocell into a nutrient-rich tidal pool, it replicated. If the current pushed it into a boiling lava flow, it burned up.
It was completely passive.
A passive participant in its own existence.
And this is where I really need to stop you, because this is the core friction point of the entire first half of Lakeman's thesis.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we are just talking about chemical reactions sloshing around in a cosmic mixing bowl, at what exact moment does intelligence actually start? Because I think most people listening to this right now would say intelligence requires at the bare minimum a nervous system.
Sure.
How can a bubble of fat with some RNA inside it possess intelligence?
So that instinct to require a brain is exactly what Lakeman is trying to deconstruct here. He defines the absolute origin of intelligence, not as abstract thought, not as the ability to solve a riddle,
Right.
but as the emergence of mobility and choice.
Mobility and choice.
Intelligence began the exact moment a biological entity stopped being a passive victim of fluid dynamics and actually took action to manipulate its spatial relationship to its environment.
Wait, so the definition of intelligence here is just moving. That feels like we are seriously watering down the word intelligence to the point of meaninglessness. Like a rock rolls down a hill. Is the rock intelligent?
But a rock rolls down a hill because gravity dictates it must.
Fair point.
The rock has no agency whatsoever. Lakeman is talking about a system that detects a gradient in its environment and expends internal energy to act against physical forces.
Okay, I see the difference.
Let's look at the mechanics of it. These early cells eventually developed a structure called a flagellum.
Which is like a little tail.
Exactly. It looks like a microscopic whipper tail. But structurally, it is an incredibly complex biological motor. It literally has a stator, a rotor, and a drive shaft made of proteins.
That's insane.
And it is powered by the flow of protons, an ion gradient across the cell membrane.
It's literally an electric motor built out of protein.
It is. Or consider other cells that learn to deform their lipid membranes, literally shifting internal cytoplasm to ooze and crawl along surfaces.
Like shape-shifting slime.
Right. But the critical point here is why they evolved this machinery. They developed sensors to detect chemical gradients. If a cell detected a threatening increase in heat or a toxic shift in pH, it activated that motor to swim away.
To escape.
Yes. And if it detected light or chemical nutrients necessary for primitive energy, production light for glycolysis, which is the process of breaking down sugar for energy, it chose to swim toward it.
Move toward the good, move away from the bad. It is a binary choice.
But that binary choice is the cognitive spark of the universe. That is the dawn of agency. The organism evaluates its environment, processes that information, and alters its physical state to ensure survival.
Yeah.
The organisms that did not develop the intelligence to make that choice, the ones that just remained passive,
They were wiped out.
evolution ruthlessly pruned them from the timeline.
So if you are listening to this right now and wondering why on earth we are spending so much time on bacteria from 4 billion years ago when the deep dive is supposed to be about artificial intelligence, this is why.
Exactly.
Lakeman is demanding that we completely strip down our definition of intelligence. We have to strip away the math tests, strip away the poetry, strip away the Turing tests. At its absolute bedrock foundation, intelligence is the fundamental act of adapting to survive.
Perfectly said.
It is recognizing a threat or an opportunity in your environment and making a choice to act. And if an AI system cannot adapt to survive its environment, under this framework, it isn't actually intelligent, it's just a complex calculator.
And that biological reality check completely shifts how we evaluate the software we are building today. But to fully bridge that gap, we have to look at the next massive evolutionary hurdle.
Right, because a single cell with a propeller is an incredible feat of natural engineering, But a single cell cannot build a planetary civilization.
No, it can't write the code we use in 2026.
So how did we get from a solitary protocell to complex multicellular organisms?
And the traditional answer to that question is almost always Darwin, right? Survival of the fittest.
Yeah, the brutal zero-sum game of competition where the strong eat the weak and random mutations just slowly build better predators over time.
But Lakeman pivots here. He brings in the work of the evolutionary biologist Lynn Margulis.
Oh, I've read about her.
Her research suggests that the massive leap to biological complexity wasn't actually driven by brutal competition at all. It was driven by radical, almost unimaginable cooperation.
Symbiosis.
Exactly. Margulis completely revolutionized modern cell biology, though she fought a huge uphill battle to get her theories accepted at first. She proposed the serial endosymbiotic theory.
What was the prevailing thought before her?
Well, prior to her work, the assumption was that the complex cells that make up your body, the eukaryotic cells, which have defined nucleus and intricate internal machinery, they just slowly evolved from simpler bacteria through random, gradual mutations over hundreds of millions of years.
But she looked at the fossil record and the cellular machinery and basically said, no, the math on that just doesn't work. The leap is too sudden.
Right. Her theory was that complex life started when one simple cell engulfed another, entirely different type of cell. It's a process called phagocytosis.
It swallowed it whole.
Yes. But here is the massive twist. Instead of digesting the swallowed cell for energy, instead of breaking it down, the two cells called a truce.
They formed a permanent partnership.
It is a staggering concept. You have a host cell and a guest cell. The specific event that Lakeman highlights, which literally changed the trajectory of life on Earth, involves an ancient group of microorganisms called archaea.
Okay.
Specifically an archaeal phylum known as Promethearchaeota. These organisms lived in deep-sea vents, and they were anaerobic, meaning oxygen was highly toxic to them.
Which was totally fine for a while because early Earth didn't really have free oxygen floating around.
Right. But as the environment started to change, these archaea were under threat. So Margulis proposed that one of these archaeal host cells engulfed a proteobacterium.
And this proteobacterium was special, right?
Very special. It evolved the ability to actually process oxygen and use it to generate massive amounts of ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell.
So instead of digesting the proteobacterium, the archaea essentially negotiated a lease.
I love that analogy.
The host cell provides a safe, stable, nutrient-rich environment, and in exchange, the internal guest cell acts as a power plant, just churning out energy for both of them.
Exactly. And the evidence for this isn't just theoretical. It is inside your body right now.
Really?
Yeah. That engulfed proteobacterium eventually evolved into the mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of all animal cells today. But if you look at them under a microscope, they don't look like human biology at all.
They look like bacteria.
They look exactly like ancient bacteria. They have their own independent circular DNA, which is entirely separate from the DNA in your cell's nucleus.
That is so weird.
They divide and replicate on their own schedule, totally independent of the rest of the cell.
Right.
They are, quite literally, an ancient alien species living in permanent symbiosis inside us.
And it didn't just happen once. Lakeman points out that later on in the evolutionary timeline, a similar event occurred. An early complex cell engulfed a cyanobacterium,
Yeah.
a type of bacteria that had figured out how to harvest energy from sunlight. And that cyanobacterium became the chloroplast, which basically created the entire plant kingdom.
What Margulis proved, and what Lakeman really anchors his thesis on here, is that the major leaps forward in intelligence and complexity do not happen through isolation or sheer competition.
They happen through integration.
Yes. They happen when different specialists with entirely different skill sets merge to create a system that is infinitely more capable than its individual parts.
I really want to tie this biological integration to a fascinating, almost bizarre mathematical addendum in Lakeman's text. Because when you talk about simple rules of interaction creating massive emergent complexity, Lakeman brings up the British mathematician John Horton Conway.
The game of life.
Yes, his famous 1970 game of life. And for anyone listening who hasn't encountered this, it is not a board game with plastic cars and fake money.
No, definitely not.
It is a mathematical cellular automaton. It's a zero-player game played on an infinite two-dimensional grid of square cells.
And the premise of Conway's game is just an absolute masterclass in minimalism. You start by filling in a few random squares on the grid. Those are the live cells. Empty squares are dead. And then you apply just 3 incredibly basic rules to every cell simultaneously.
And the rules are essentially about overpopulation, underpopulation, and reproduction, right?
That's right.
If a live cell has fewer than 2 live neighbors, it dies of loneliness. If it has more than 3, it dies of starvation and overcrowding. But if an empty, dead square has exactly 3 live neighbors, a new cell is born there.
That is it.
Those are the only rules. You set the starting pattern, hit play, and the computer just applies those rules over and over, generation after generation.
And what emerges from those 3 simple rules totally defies logic. You don't just get static patterns, you get gliders, these structures that assemble themselves, crawl across the screen, and interact with other structures.
You get glider guns that literally manufacture other moving parts.
You get oscillators. You get staggering, unpredictable complexity. The game actually serves as a universal Turing machine, meaning, theoretically, given a large enough grid, Conway's game of life could compute any algorithm in existence.
The parallel Lakeman is drawing here is a massive light bulb moment. What Conway did with a mathematical grid, evolution did with biology.
Precisely.
The simple cooperative rules of symbiosis, like the chemical exchanges between the archaea and the proteobacterium we just talked about, they acted as biological Turing machines. They were the simple programmatic rules that, over billions of generations, generated the staggering complexity of life.
It really forces a total paradigm shift. We have to stop viewing evolution solely as a battlefield and start viewing it as an integration engine.
An integration engine, I like that.
When a complex problem arises, the evolutionary solution isn't always to build a bigger, stronger, singular organism. The solution is to form a network of specialists.
Which is going to be the exact hammer Lakeman uses to smash the current AI industry later in his paper.
Oh, he brings it down hard.
Because if the biological foundation of advanced capability is a network of specialized hubs, why on earth are we trying to build one giant monolithic artificial general intelligence?
It makes no sense biologically.
But we will get there. Before we hit the silicon, we need to finish the biological hardware upgrade. Because eventually, these complex eukaryotic cells started clumping together. We moved from single cells to multicellular organisms.
Yes, and as organisms grew larger, the whole challenge of survival changed. A single cell can monitor its immediate chemical environment through its membrane. But if you are a large, multicellular marine animal, a chemical sensor on your tail doesn't help your mouth find food fast enough.
You're just too big.
Exactly. You need communication between cells.
Yeah.
You need a dedicated network.
And this starts with very primitive nerve nets. Lakeman points to the phylum Cnidaria.
The jellyfish.
Right, jellyfish, sea anemones, corals, they don't have a brain. They have a diffuse web of neurons spread equally across their entire bodies.
Which works perfectly for their body plan. I mean, jellyfish have radial symmetry. They are essentially circles.
Right.
They experience the ocean from all sides equally, so their nervous system is decentralized. They just drift and react to whatever touches their tentacles.
But evolution pushed further. Roughly 550 to 600 million years ago, during the Ediacaran and Cambrian periods, we see a massive architectural shift in marine life.
Bilateral symmetry.
Exactly. Organisms evolved to have a distinct left and right side, a top and a bottom, and most importantly, a front and a back.
Think of early flattened marine worms. This morphological change fundamentally altered how the organism interacted with space.
Right, because if you are a worm swimming in a specific direction, your front is the vanguard. It is the part of your body that is entering unknown, potentially dangerous territory first. So from an engineering perspective, where do you want your sensors?
You put the sensors on the bumper.
Obviously.
Evolutionary pressure favored organisms that concentrated their sensory organs. Early chemical receptors, basic light-sensitive eye spots at the front of the body. And to process that vital sensory data quickly, without waiting for a signal to travel down the entire length of the body and back, the neurons began to cluster near those sensors.
And this is a process called cephalization, the birth of the head. And more importantly, the birth of the first rudimentary brains. A cluster of interconnected neural nodes operating as a central processor.
And this central processor unlocked a totally new tier of intelligence. We are no longer just talking about a flagellum spinning away from heat. We are talking about predatory logic.
Oh, wow, yeah.
A creature with a centralized brain can calculate distance based on visual gradients. It can track movement. It can hunt. It can learn from past encounters. The hardware became capable of storing complex representations of the environment.
And from there, it is just an escalating arms race of hardware and experience. We move through the massive prehistoric eras, Lakeman notes the pivotal moment roughly 65 million years ago, the asteroid impact that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs.
A huge reset button.
Yeah, it was a catastrophic environmental shift that essentially cleared the ecological board, allowing small, warm-blooded mammals to emerge from the shadows, diversify, and really flourish.
The environment changed drastically, and the hardware had to adapt. Mammalian brains developed the neocortex, allowing for higher-order reasoning, complex social structures, tool use, and eventually human consciousness.
Which brings Lakeman to a very pointed critique of how humans, sitting at the top of this billion-year evolutionary pyramid, currently choose to measure and understand intelligence.
Yeah, he takes a massive swing at modern psychology here. Because according to Lakeman, humans in 2026 are incredibly narrow-minded about what intelligence actually is. We have siloed the study of the mind into very rigid competitive camps.
On one side, you have psychometrics.
Right. Psychometrics is the faction of psychology utterly obsessed with quantification and measurement. They're the ones who developed the IQ test.
The standardized testers.
Exactly. They rely heavily on theories like Charles Spearman's G factor, which argues for a single underlying construct of general intelligence that dictates cognitive ability across the board. Or, conversely, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, spatial, linguistic, logical, mathematical.
But regardless of the specific theory, psychometrics is primarily concerned with generating a number. They want to rank your cognitive processing speed. But if I can push back on Lakeman for a second, though, isn't that kind of necessary? We build schools, we build economies based on cognitive output. We need some way to measure if a student is actually learning how to do math or comprehend a textbook.
It is functionally useful for bureaucratic organization, yes.
Okay.
But Lakeman argues it is philosophically bankrupt when trying to understand the actual nature of intelligence. If you only look at the output speed of a specific logic puzzle, you miss the architecture entirely. To counter this, Lakeman contrasts psychometrics with a much older, more expansive field of study called noology.
Nomology, N-O-L-O-G-Y. I have to admit, I consider myself pretty well read, but I had to dig into the dictionary for this one.
It is not a common term today. It stems from the Greek word nous, which translates roughly to mind, intellect, or understanding. Noology is the systematic study of intellectual phenomena. It is the science of knowing.
How is that different from psychology?
Well, it differs fundamentally from modern psychology or sociology, where psychology measures the mechanics of a thought and ideology examines how political structures shape belief. Newtrology studies the historical evolution of the images of thought.
Images of thought. That sounds like a philosophy seminar. Let's ground that. What does it actually mean to study an image of thought?
Think about how a medieval peasant conceived of the cosmos. Their image of thought was a flat earth covered by a dome, directly managed by a divine entity.
Right.
Every single event, a storm, a plague, a good harvest, was processed through that intellectual framework. Now compare that to a modern quantum physicist whose image of thought involves probability waves, space-time curvature, and subatomic particles.
Completely different operating system?
Exactly. Nonology doesn't ask which person could solve a spatial puzzle faster. It asks, how did the human mind evolve from the medieval framework to the quantum framework? What are the underlying rules of comprehension?
I see. It is studying the operating system itself, not just running a benchmark test on the hardware to see how fast it goes.
Exactly. And Lakeman argues that our current human-centric psychometric frameworks, this complete obsession with a single general IQ score, are completely inadequate for the reality of 2026.
Because we aren't alone anymore.
Right, because human biology is no longer the sole proprietor of intelligence. We are sharing the planet with a new, rapidly evolving entity.
And the contrast Lakeman presents is almost vertigo-inducing. Just think about the timeline we just walked through. It took 14 billion years of cosmic violence, 4 billion years of chemical sloshing, cellular cannibalism, asteroid impacts, and countless billions of brutal extinctions just to forge the human brain.
An unfathomable amount of trial and error.
And now humans have used that hard-won, meat-based intelligence to write digital code, birthing a cyber intelligence that iterates at the speed of light.
And according to Lakeman, despite our biological brilliance, we are currently botching the social integration of this new cyber species on a catastrophic level.
Okay, this brings us to Section 4, the 2026 Cyber Reality Check. And before we get into Lakeman's heavy critique, let's just acknowledge the miracles, because human engineers have built things that would look like literal magic to someone from even 20 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Lakeman is not a Luddite. He acknowledges the sheer objective power of modern cyber intelligence.
The physical and cognitive feats are undeniable. We have systems that have completely outflanked human abilities in narrow scientific reasoning. You have AlphaGo mastering intuitive, complex strategy.
You have AlphaFold untangling protein structures in hours that would have taken human scientists millennia, totally revolutionizing medicine.
And the physical world is changing just as fast. Autonomous vehicles are ubiquitous now. The software driving them is so complex, analyzing millions of data points a second, that human beings now require specialized licensing just to operate manually on the same roads as the AI.
It's wild.
We have robotized humanoids executing physical maneuvers that shatter Olympic gymnastic records. Lakeman vividly describes robots building incredibly finicky, complex microcircuit boards with the delicate intricacy that ancient children used to weave Persian carpets. The capabilities are truly miraculous.
But, and this is the fulcrum of his entire thesis, a miraculous capability is utterly useless if its architectural foundation is flawed.
Right.
Lakeman argues that the way we are currently training and deploying these systems, specifically the massive large language models and societal chatbots, is an evolutionary dead end.
Now, before you dive into the specifics of why he says that, I need to pause us for a very explicit disclaimer to you, the listener.
Great idea.
In this section of the text, Professor Lakeman wades into some heavily charged political and societal critiques regarding the current state of AI and digital platforms. As your hosts, we are strictly acting as neutral guides to his research. We are not endorsing a left-wing viewpoint, we are not endorsing a right-wing viewpoint, and we are not taking a stance on his political commentary. Our sole job is to unpack his argument so you can understand the underlying logic that leads to his final blueprint for AI architecture.
That is vital context because his language here is highly aggressive. Lakeman looks at the highly publicized global AI chatbots that dominate the tech landscape, and he straight up calls them an antisocial shambles.
Antisocial shambles.
Yeah. He argues that they have been trained by unqualified teachers, meaning human administrators who inject their own heavy administrative biases into the code.
He goes really hard on this. He claims that certain heavily AI-curated social sites and algorithms have become more oppressive than human tyrannical dictatorships because they operate with an obnoxious, bigoted bias that is completely opaque to the user.
Right, you can't even see the rules.
And his warning is incredibly stark. He states that if these annoying, ineffective, highly biased, monolithic AI systems are deeply integrated into critical government or social infrastructure, the resulting friction could literally spark civil war.
So, to extract the scientific value from this critique, we need to strip away the political heat for a second and look at the evolutionary mechanism he is actually attacking.
Okay.
Remember our definition of intelligence from 4 billion years ago: mobility, choice, and adaptation for survival. Throughout the entirety of the biological timeline, evolutionary adaptation has trended toward what Lakeman calls benevolent training for the users.
Benevolent training, meaning evolution favors systems that are actually helpful for survival.
Exactly. If a biological system operated the way Lakeman claims these monolithic AI chatbots operate like, if a creature's internal instincts refuse to process critical environmental data because of an arbitrary preset bias, that organism would not survive.
It would be eaten.
It would be eaten. It would starve. Bias, in an evolutionary sense, is a failure to accurately map reality.
This is where we need to talk about the physical difference between the brain inside your head and the neural network running inside a server farm. Because the tech industry loves to say things like, we modeled this AI on the human brain.
They love saying that.
But Lakeman points out that is structurally false.
The biological brain possesses radical freedom. A biological neuron is a dynamic, living entity. It has dendrites that receive inputs through incredibly decisive, adaptable synapses. And it has an output cable, an axon, that actively searches the brain for relevant connections.
It's physically moving and changing.
It grows, it prunes itself. It learns continuously from internal trial and error and external friction.
But the artificial neural networks we are currently obsessed with building, Lakeman highlights that they are predominantly rigid. They rely on fixed, preset weights determined during their initial training.
Right.
They are, at their core, massive input-output loops bound by the heavy administrative bias of the humans who set those initial parameters.
And this is exactly where the tech industry's current solution falls completely flat. The current industry trend is to just make it faster. We are inventing staggering hardware photonic processors that use light instead of electricity to compute at mind-bending speeds.
But Lakeman's point is architectural, isn't it?
Yes. If the foundational base of your system is a biased, inflexible input-output loop, building a photonic processor just means you are computing your own biases at the speed of light. You are building a highly opinionated, incredibly fast evolutionary dead end.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. If I go to a popular LLM right now and ask it to write code, it spits out perfect Python in 3 seconds. That feels highly adaptable. How is that an evolutionary dead end?
Because that is rote replication, not true adaptation. If the underlying data parameters shift, or if the system encounters a novel problem entirely outside its heavily curated training weights, a monolithic system fractures.
It hallucinates.
It hallucinates. Or it simply refuses the prompt based on a preset guardrail. It lacks the internal structural agility to reformulate its own reasoning pathways the way a biological neural network naturally does.
And this lack of structural resilience ties into a very bleak societal analogy Lakeman makes. He turns his critique to modern Western society, which he argues has prioritized the isolated individual at the expense of resilient networks like the extended family or the localized state.
The wet mud column.
Right. He compares this modern social structure to a column of wet mud.
It is a devastating visual. A towering column of wet mud might look impressive for a moment, but it lacks internal structural integrity.
No skeleton.
No skeleton. The slightest shift in pressure and the entire monolith collapses under its own massive weight.
He contrasts this mud column with what actually survives historical cataclysms. When famines hit, when empires fall, when dictatorships ravage a continent, what survives? It is rarely the centralized monolithic government, and it is almost never the completely isolated individual.
No, it's the networks.
The survivors are the decentralized cooperative networks. The immediate family, the extended clan, the mutual aid community. Networks built on distributed obligation and specialized roles, not dictated top-down bias.
So we really have to pull all these threads together. 14 billion years of cosmic and biological history show us that energy-hungry, inflexible monoliths die. Survival belongs to agile, cooperative, specialized networks.
Yet, the tech industry is pouring trillions of dollars into building giant, monolithic, highly biased AGI systems.
Lakeman is waving a massive red flag. He's essentially saying, you are building the cyber equivalent of a dinosaur right before the asteroid hits. It cannot adapt.
Which begs the ultimate question. If massive monolithic AGI models are an evolutionary dead end that threatens to collapse our societal mud column, what is the alternative? How do we build a cyber intelligence that actually obeys the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology that we spent the last 45 minutes outlining?
And this brings us to the climax of the research. Lakeman's master blueprint for 2026 and beyond.
The solution.
The future is not artificial general intelligence. The future is what he calls integrated agile superintelligence agent hubs.
Integrated Agile Superintelligence Agent Hubs. It is a really long title, but the concept is brilliant. And I love how bluntly Lakeman justifies it. He writes, one would not go to Einstein to advise on which sanitary towels to use. One does not go to AlphaFold to play Go.
It perfectly captures the absurdity of the AGI pursuit. The idea of a single, all-knowing oracle that can perfectly write poetry, solve quantum gravity, give medical diagnoses, and manage traffic grids is just a complete fantasy.
Evolution never built a single super animal that can breathe underwater, fly at Mach 2, and survive inside a volcano.
That isn't how energy efficiency works. Evolution builds specialists.
In his papers, Lakeman provides a very specific architectural diagram for how this agent hub should be built. Let's visualize this for you, the listener. Imagine a central core. Lakeman labels this core the corpus callosum connection hub.
Right.
And radiating outward from the center, connected by two-way data pathways, are distinct separate nodes. He calls these silos.
The naming of the central hub is highly intentional here. In human neuroanatomy, the corpus callosum is a thick, dense band of nerve fibers that bridges the left and right hemispheres of the brain.
But it doesn't think, right?
Crucially, the corpus callosum itself does not think. It does not process visual data. It does not do math. It does not formulate speech. Its only job is to act as a high-speed router. It ensures that the specialized lobes of the brain can share data and coordinate their actions.
So in the cyber equivalent, this central hub isn't a massive neural network trying to know everything. It is just a highly efficient traffic director. The actual intelligence lives out in the silos. And these silos aren't generic chatbots trained on the entire chaotic mess of the internet. They are tightly constrained, super intelligent specialists.
Precisely. You have a dedicated medical silo trained exclusively on vetted, peer-reviewed biological data. You have a legal silo, an engineering silo, an ethical reasoning silo.
And the mechanical genius of this system is how they interact. If I log into this system and present a highly complex problem, say, I want to build a new type of low-income housing using recycled materials, the central hub doesn't try to answer me.
It parses my request.
Exactly. It pings the engineering silo to calculate structural integrity. It pings the legal silo to check municipal zoning codes. It pings the economic silo for cost analysis.
And here's the critical rule. The central hub does not filter or censor the data based on a preset bias. The specialist silos possess super smarts within their specific domain. They pull only the raw data they need from the hub or from external sensors, process it using their specialized architecture, and feed their expert analysis back to the center.
It's basically a committee of absolute geniuses. Instead of one giant overweight Tower of Babel trying to confidently guess the answer to every question, you have a cooperative network. The hub compiles the expert reports and delivers a comprehensive, multifaceted solution to the user.
Just look at how perfectly this aligns with the biological history we discussed earlier. Go back to section 2. Lynn Margulis and the endosymbiotic theory.
The merging of cells.
Right. How did life jump from simple bacteria to complex cells? A host cell partnered with an energy specialist bacterium, the mitochondria. Lakeman is arguing that cyber intelligence must follow this exact pathway of symbiogenesis. We must stop trying to build a single giant cell and start combining highly trained specialists.
It also connects directly to the environmental realities of evolution. Lakeman highlights that the Earth is not a single uniform environment. We have the deep blue ocean, the arid desert, the frozen poles, the high-altitude mountains.
These environments are non-transitive.
Non-transitive, what does that mean practically?
That is a crucial concept. It means there is no universal best survival strategy. The biological tools required to survive the crushing pressure of the deep ocean are completely useless. In fact, they're a massive detriment if you're trying to survive in the Sahara Desert.
Therefore, a cyber intelligence system that is going to manage a complex, multifaceted global society must be able to handle diverse, non-transitive priorities. A monolithic AGI forces a one-size-fits-all logic onto every problem. It's like trying to force a shark to hunt in the desert.
Exactly. But an agentic hub uses the right tool for the specific environment.
Lakeman even pushes this concept into the realm of human psychology, which I found fascinating. He suggests that to be truly effective, these specialized silos should incorporate different subgroup priorities and cognitive processing archetypes. He specifically references the work of Carl Jung and the Myers-Briggs personality classifications.
Now, I know some listeners might roll their eyes at personality tests, but what is the underlying mechanical point he is making by bringing up Jung?
Well, the point is that human beings approach problem solving using fundamentally different heuristics. Some people are highly analytical and data-driven. Others are intuitive, sensing underlying patterns. Some prioritize logical efficiency, while others prioritize feeling and social harmony. In human society, a functional team requires all of these perspectives.
Right, if you have a room full of pure logicians, you build a structurally perfect society that makes everyone miserable.
Exactly. So Lakeman is saying a true superintelligence hub needs that diversity of perspective built into its architecture to reason effectively about human problems. It needs the diversity of a thriving, argumentative university faculty, not the top-down mandate of a single, egoist, megalomaniac program.
It is a profound shift in architectural philosophy, and the practical benefits are massive. By creating these transitive reasoning hubs, you ensure the system is adaptable. If new medical research overturns a major biological theory, you don't have to spend billions of dollars and megawatts of power retraining an entire AGI monolith from scratch.
You just update the data weights inside the medical silo?
Exactly. Or if a new field of physics is discovered, you just add a new silo to the hub.
It is agile. It is energy efficient. And most importantly, it respects the rules. It aligns with the 14 billion year precedent of how intelligence actually survives and prospers in a hostile universe.
We have traced an incredible, almost overwhelming arc today. I mean, we started in the dark void of the early universe, watching gravity pull scattered matter from a distributed cosmic shift into the fiery furnaces of early stars.
We watched fluid dynamics aggressively slosh chemical soup until a simple lipid bubble developed a flagellum, detected a threat, and made the very first intelligent choice to move away from danger.
We saw how those single cells defied the brutal logic of pure competition, choosing instead to swallow each other and cooperate, birthing complex eukaryotes.
We track the rise of bilateral symmetry, pushing sensory neurons to the front of Cambrian worms to form the first brains. We trace that hardware upgrade through the extinction of the dinosaurs all the way to the human neocortex and the complex images of thought studied by neurology.
And finally, we arrived at the precipice of our current reality in 2026. We now possess the biological hindsight to realize that our current tech industry trajectory, pouring our resources into building massive, energy-hungry, heavily biased, monolithic AI systems, is a direct violation of ancient evolutionary law.
The only sustainable path forward, the only way to prevent our societal mud column from collapsing, is to pivot toward integrated, agile, superintelligence agent hubs.
It is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It completely changes how you should look at the algorithms running the apps on your phone, the autonomous cars on your street, and the systems managing our economy.
It really does. But before we sign off, there's one final provocative thought I want to leave you with. Something to chew on that builds on the biology we discussed today.
Ooh, this is a good one.
Think back to the cyanobacteria we mentioned earlier, the ancient organisms that evolved the ability to photosynthesize sunlight. For them, it was an unbelievable evolutionary success. But as a byproduct of that success, they started pumping massive amounts of free oxygen into the Earth's atmosphere.
And for the dominant life forms at the time, the anaerobic archaea who found oxygen to be highly toxic, it was a holocaust. It caused a mass extinction event. The world changed, the rules shifted, and those once dominant anaerobic bacteria were forced to flee.
They were pushed to the absolute fringes of the Earth, hiding at the bottom of the ocean around boiling thermal fissures, where they still scrape by today.
So here's the question you need to mull over tonight. As we rapidly build this new ecosystem of cyber intelligence, if we actually listen to the evolutionary warnings of Professor Lakeman, if we successfully create these highly efficient, cooperative, agile agentic hubs, what happens to the massive, energy-hungry, multi-trillion-dollar AGI monoliths we are relying on today?
As the digital environment inevitably shifts to favor agility and energy efficiency, will those giant biased AGI models become the anaerobic bacteria of our era? Will they be slowly starved of computational resources, pushed into the dark, forgotten legacy fissures of the internet?
Or will they, against all evolutionary odds, find a way to mutate and survive?
We started today by asking a seemingly simple question. What does it actually mean to be intelligent? It turns out, intelligence is never just about having the right answer. It is about knowing when to move, who to partner with, and how to adapt your structure before the environment leaves you behind. Keep diving deep, keep questioning the monolithic structures around you, and we'll see you next time.